I would first like to thank Congressman Cummings and Ranking Member Jordan and the members of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform for this opportunity to speak about the lasting effects of childhood trauma. I am 28 years old and from Helena, Montana, where I have lived for most of my life. I am Portuguese, Filipino, and Hispanic. My family is all from the Hawaiian Islands and moved to the mainland before I was born in hopes to give my mother, who became pregnant with me at the age of 16, a fresh start and a chance at a better life. Both my grandmother and my mother are victims of abuse. Neither of them had ever received help or justice for their trauma. In fact, abuse became something that wasn't acknowledged in our family because it was considered normal, or the price you paid to be supported and have a place to live. My mother's first marriage was to a man who physically and verbally abused her. Although she tried to shield my siblings and I from it, we witnessed her being hit, shoved, and even sat on by him in order to prevent her from being able to leave. After several escape attempts, she finally got us away from him. I was 9 years old at the time, and we settled down in a new town where she met her second husband, Raul. Raul was kind to my mom and seemed to love my siblings and I. However, as I got older, he changed. I was 11 years old when Raul began abusing me. It started with him groping my body in a sexual way and pretending he mistook me for my mother. At the time, I didn't know that this was a form of sexual abuse, and I didn't know how to tell my mom. I didn't want to be the one to break up our family after all we had already been through. As the abuse continued, I began to distance myself from him, which made him lash out at me in violent ways. He once had beat me so badly that our neighbors had heard my screams and called the police. This was my first open case with the Department of Family Services. They came and took pictures of the bruises all over my body, and Raul was arrested, but unfortunately the case was closed and he was back in our home by the next week. By the time I was 12 years old, I was so depressed I had stopped eating and was beginning to self-harm. Still unable to tell my mom what was going on, she became worried and had me admitted into a children's hospital. There I was diagnosed with bipolar depression and heavily medicated for 3 months until I was behaving well enough to go home. I was released, and just before my 13th birthday, Raul raped me. This time, I did tell my mom, and we went to the police. I was examined at a hospital, and Raul was arrested the next day. They found him with scratches all over his face and body, just as I had described, as I fought to be free. All of the evidence of what he had done was there, but he knew my mom could not live with herself knowing she had allowed me to get hurt. He knew she was vulnerable from the day that he met us, and he manipulated her once again into believing I was just a bad child, trying to ruin her happy life for my own selfish reasons. Eventually, she was in denial that he had ever done anything wrong, and I was taken by DFS and placed in group homes. I was on juvenile probation, and then I lived in foster care before being placed in the Florence Crittenton home for pregnant teens. I was 14 years old and 4 months pregnant when I arrived. It was at Florence Crittenton that I was finally treated for the traumatic experiences that I had survived. I attended therapy sessions, and I learned that more than half the girls living there at the time were also survivors of sexual and/or violent crimes. After my case had gone to trial and Raul was sentenced to prison, I was able to go back home with my mother. Everything had happened so fast, and now I had a baby to take care of. Mine, as well as my mother's mental health, was put on the back burner. We did what we knew best, and we moved forward. Raul was unable to hurt me anymore, but I still lived in fear every day. I had a hard time developing healthy relationships as an adult. I had major trust issues with every man that came into my life, including my third stepfather. I was 22 years old when I met my husband, Jason, and I was still having night terrors regularly. My husband would have to calm me down and help me back to sleep, and it took me years to be calm in my own house and not jump every time he walked up behind me. We are now raising 3 children together, and like any parent, I fear that the worst could happen to them. I try to have open conversations about abuse with them so that they can recognize it if they experience or witness it, and help them understand how they can tell someone. I am determined to end the cycle of abuse in my family with me. I am now involved in national advocacy work for young parents and survivors of adverse childhood experiences through National Crittenton. I have held group meetings at my local Crittenton agency where I share my story and give the participants a safe, judgment-free space to talk openly about their experiences, and I try to support them in their journey to healing. Looking back, I feel as though I slipped through the cracks in the agencies that are designed to protect children from trauma. I was labeled as a troubled youth when really I just needed someone to recognize I was being hurt. Sexual abuse is an epidemic in our nation. Studies have found that up to 89% of sexual abuse victims are female, and of all the females raped in the U.S., 41% are under the age of 18. For youth who are involved in the juvenile justice system, the girls' rate of sexual abuse is 4 times higher than the boys in juvenile justice, and the girls' rate of complex trauma is nearly twice as high. What Congress can do to help is make sure that schools, foster homes, group homes, and juvenile justice facilities provide services that support girls in healing from experiences that caused trauma they faced, and make a change from just looking at what we did and ask first, what happened to us? Hundreds of thousands of girls will and have faced similar experiences as I did, and they each deserve a chance to be valued, respected, and supported when asking for help and healing. They deserve a chance to live happy and healthy lives. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it will provide insight to this subject and a sense of urgency to provide more resources to survivors of traumatic experiences.
Thank you very much.